How many of you love a good deal? Most of you. Most of you. Some of you just like being, taken for a fool, but most of us love a good deal. My wife had to explain to me one time that if there's $100 item that is 50% off, that we're basically giving up $50 if we don't buy that item. I was told this is called girl math. I'm not a practitioner. I don't understand it. I just kind of stare, a little bit of drool starts to come out, and I'm dumbfounded. Have you ever been on the wrong end of a deal, though? Man, don't you feel like a sucker? You buy the thing, and in your mind, you're like, man, how could I ever live without this? And then you walk away and you find out it doesn't work the way you expected, or you overpaid because next door you could have bought it for half of that. And all of a sudden you walk out and you just feel you just got taken advantage of. You've given up what could have been used, your money, your time, energy, and you have nothing to show for it. What we're going to look at today is possibly the worst trade in history. And there are some pretty dumb trades when we go back through history. This is one of them. This is so high on the list, the thing we're going to see today, as we're going to watch a man throw everything away. We're going to watch his attempts to get it back. And we're going to watch how a family is torn apart as a result of it. Here in Genesis chapter number 25, we see Isaac and Rebekah once again. If you were with us last week, we went through the love story of Isaac and Rebekah and how Rebekah, the Abraham's servant, went and found her and she came down to marry Isaac, and just the way that God worked these things out. I encourage you, if you didn't hear the message last week, go back and listen to it. It's a beautiful story of faith in God and trusting God. And then what we find, the next chapter in that we're jumping over, is Isaac becomes a lot like Abraham, where he goes and he's near this man named Abimelech, and he says, you know what, Rebekah, we can say that she's not my wife, that she's something else. And so Abimelech takes a liking to Rebekah, and then he sees Rebekah and Isaac flirting, and he goes, not again, because his dad had just done this to him years before. So in the midst of this is a wild story, and then they leave, and God takes care of all of these things, even in the midst of some of the stupidity. Praise God, right? So then they come now, and several years later, and Rebekah has not yet had a child. Now, if you recall, the promise to Abraham that was so significant in Isaac's birth is what? It's that a great nation's going to come out of their family. And that through that great nation, there will be a final and a true son, that through him, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So it's kind of a big deal that Rebekah has children. That was the whole purpose. Abraham says, hey, servant, you have to go to this place and find a wife because Isaac has to have children. But now Rebekah is infertile. She's not able to conceive. And so this is weighing on their hearts. And Isaac goes to God and he's praying, and God does again what he did before. And he opens up the womb here of Rebekah. And so we see that Rebekah conceives, and she has not one son, but two sons. And so then she goes to God, because at this time they're not doing all the ultrasounds and they're not figuring all this stuff out. They don't have that technology. She doesn't know what's going on inside of her. And so she says, God, what is this? Something has to be wrong. And God says, well, funny story. There are two nations, and these two nations are going to divide, and they're going to fight against one another. And then he says something really interesting. He's saying, and the older will serve the younger. Well, that's not how this culture would operate. The culture of the day would be that the older was the one who would inherit the blessing. The older was the one that would receive. He would be the lineage. And so the assumption is there are two of them. The older is going to have the preference. But here God says, no, that's not how it's going to be. The younger will be the one that will rule over the older. And so these two boys are born. We meet here in the next couple of verses these two twin boys, Jacob and Esau. And these two could not be any more different. My wife and I have twin boys who could not be any more different. I texted her this week and I said, I'm reading through this story and this is oddly reminiscent. You have one boy here in this story who is impulsive, outdoorsy, compelled and controlled by the things that he desires and feels. And this is this son, Esau. And when he is born in verse 24, what we see is that these twins that come out, the first in verse 25 was red, all his body like a hairy cloak. Can you imagine that on a newborn, right? He pops out and he's like, man, he's got a built-in sweater. And so this is Esau. And that's what they name him. This word Esau kind of, it has a similarity to the Hebrew word red. And so they kind of what they name him is, hey, he's red. Afterwards, his brother came out with this really significant thing, his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And this word Jacob, we'll get to, some of you have probably heard that Jacob has specific meanings. The literal meaning of Jacob is at the heel. At the heel. And so that's why he's named this at the heel. And we're going to get into some of the things that shoot out from that. If you're like, wait a second, I heard, we'll get there. His name means at the heel. And he comes out holding Esau's heel. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. Well, Jacob was a quiet man. That word quiet is the same Hebrew word that's used in Job chapter 1, meaning blameless. He was a quiet man dwelling in tents, a peaceable man. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And so immediately we see this distinction between these sons. And what we understand as we go into this story is that the blessing is not coming through the elder, it's coming through the younger. And so we see Jacob now as the one, the child through whom this promise will be kept. God has told Rebekah this thing. We don't know if Rebekah goes to Isaac and says, you're not going to believe what God just told me. We don't know if she made Jacob aware of this. We don't know any of this, but we do know here that Rebekah is aware and that God is going to do this thing. As we look at this promise, I want to once again, before we get too deep into the story, remind us of what the promise is, what this blessing is that they're going to be battling over. Yes, within the birthright is our possessions and our things like that. But primarily when we're looking at Abraham's family, this promise is the promise that one day there will be a child that will be a blessing to all nations. That child is Jesus Christ, the one who is both the son of Abraham and a son of Isaac and a son of Jacob, but also the son of God, who came and was born, took on flesh, and in that flesh lived a sinless life, and yet died on the cross, was buried, and then rose again. And through this thing that we call the gospel, our sin can be taken away and we can have forgiveness because of the work of Jesus. So before we get too deep and we try to make this passage a moralistic one, I want to remember the promise that God has given through Adam and Eve in the very beginning when they sin, of the one that would come and crush the head of the serpent, that is now repeated again and again through Abraham and Isaac and now into Jacob and his family. Here, as we get into this story of Jacob and Esau, I want you to remember that God is preparing for tomorrow's purposes even today. Even at the beginning of Jacob and Esau's life, God knew who these men would be. He knew what was going to play out, and he saw what was going to happen. And God was not caught off guard by all of the events that you're about to see playing out over these next couple of chapters. But instead, what do we find? Is we find that here God is working through the situations and the circumstances. And I want to remind you that God is working in your life today to prepare you for tomorrow. God is working in your life right now to do things that you don't understand yet. He is doing things that maybe you can see some of it, but a lot of it, I'm going to tell you right now, you can't see it. I used to love being able to watch as my dad would take our car to the car wash, not the one that you would like ride through. You remember the car wash? You'd have to get out and you'd watch the car go through the tunnel. And I would sit there as like a 5 or 6 year old and I would just like glue my face to the glass, watching the car go through. I just thought it was an incredible process, watching all of it happen. And so I'd watch the cars one by one go through this car wash until my dad says, hey, it's time to go. Ours is done. And we go and get back in the car. Sometimes you can see the way that God is working and you can observe it and you can just watch in awe and in wonder. But there are other times where you just have to trust that this is going on. Maybe there's a time where you sent your kids to your room and you said their rooms and you said, hey, you got to clean your room. But can I tell you that when we send them to the room and say, hey, clean this room, what are we kind of doing the whole time that they're cleaning? I hope they're doing this. Sometimes I think we treat God that way. Whereas God's working and as he's doing the stuff, we're like, I know you're working, but I also hope you're working. I hope you're doing this stuff because I can't see it. I can't bear witness to it. So God, I hope that these things are happening. But can I tell you this morning, you can trust God. You can trust him as he's going about and doing these things in your life. He's not one who is an absentee. He doesn't just not show up. He doesn't just not accomplish his plans. With God, his saying is his doing. And so even at the beginning, as he begins the work in us, what does he say? He's going to see it through to completion. And so in the moments where you say, God, I don't know how this is going to happen, that's fine. There are many things that we don't know how it's going to happen, but God has never experienced that. And God is watching over and he is caring for and he is shepherding his people even now. And so God is preparing for tomorrow's purposes even today. What we find in verse number 29 is that in the midst of all this, Esau, who is the eldest at this time, in this moment, Esau is still the one who is, from every human sense, due the birthright. It belongs to him in this moment from a human perspective. But I want you to learn a little bit about Esau here in the midst of this, because we're going to find out that Esau, as much as maybe from a human perspective, he was deserving of it, we're going to find from a spiritual perspective that was very much not the case. As the scripture tells us, once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. Therefore his name was called Edom. Edom again meaning red. It's similar. Anyways, we'll get to the language. How about that? Verse 31, Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. And Esau says, watch what Esau says. Because can you just pause for a second? Can you just imagine, like, if you're dealing with your brother and you're like, hey, can I have a bite of that? And he says, hey, give me your inheritance. And especially in this situation, some of you are like, listen, what inheritance, right? But listen, Isaac is a wealthy guy. So even just from a physical perspective, not to mention all the benefits and the blessings of God, right? And so in this moment, Jacob says, well, if you sell me that, I'll give you a bite. What are you talking like? But what is Esau's response? What is Esau's response? He says, I'm about to die. Exaggerate much? I mean, Esau, for being like this manly guy, he's kind of a drama queen. He just comes in, I'm going to die if you don't give this to me. Of what use is a birthright to me? So Jacob said, swear it to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And see, the way that the scripture is phrasing this, the way the scripture is wording this is a done deal, right? This is not just some, it's not your kindergartners trading, Doritos for a carrot, like in the lunchroom. This is an oath that they're swearing. These are adult men who are making a pact. And so Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. You see, what's wrong with Esau? Esau prioritizes the immediate over the eternal. He has no concern for the things of God, for the things of the promises God has made to his family. He has no concern for any of these things that, to this point, the rest of the family, it's what their life has been about, God's direction and God's shepherding and God's care and God's promise and provision. And he doesn't care a thing about that. He cares about the here and the now and what's happening right here in this moment. But I want to warn you today that it's foolish to doubt God's plan for tomorrow just because you can't see his hand today. And in this moment, Esau says, what good is this? What good is this? And he doubts God's goodness for tomorrow. He doubts God's goodness for the next thing, for that blessing and for that birthright, because all he can see are his needs today. And so be very careful. It is foolish to doubt God's plan for tomorrow just because you cannot see his hand today. You see, one of the most incredible things that I have ever experienced, I think many of you could speak to this too, is the invisible hand of God. The invisible hand of God. What we would call God's providence, the way that he works in incredible ways behind the scenes. We looked at that in Rebecca and the servants' lives last week, and we saw the way that he was shaping and forming. And God continues to exist, but we can be tempted to believe that because we can't see the plan, that it doesn't exist. And we can be tempted to believe that because it doesn't make sense to us, that it doesn't exist. I mean, this would be like going into an artist who is just painting on a big, beautiful canvas. And as he begins the work and puts some strokes on the canvas to say, hey, that is terrible. That is despicable. That art is going to be worthless. And yet we're judging that thing before it's come to fruition, before it's complete, before it's done. And can I warn you, there are a lot of things in this world that we can't see, but we believe in them. Oxygen. How many of you guys believe in oxygen? Hopefully all of you, okay? Have you ever seen oxygen? I have not, but I'm addicted to it. Can't live without it. And yet we say, hey, there it is. How about gravity? Anybody ever seen gravity? And yet we can prove it, we can demonstrate it, we know it exists, we know it is real. I think of the things, the electricity keeping our lights on. And yes, there are moments when we see the arcing and the sparking and we see the crazy shows of electricity, but when it's running through a wire, it doesn't look any different to our eyes, does it? And yet it's there. We see the way that plays out, or even our DNA when we look at our own genetics. Yes, under a microscope, you can view and you can see, but for most of us, we've never beheld that, have we? We've seen what someone else has shown us. And yet we understand that it's a reality. We believe in things we can't see all the time. And the way that God works, I love this description that Jesus gives in John chapter number 3 when he describes the work of the Spirit. He says, the wind blows where it will. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it's going. But you see the way that it works. You feel the way that it works. Why? Because we see the things getting caught up in it. We see the effects that it has in our lives. I took our kids, a couple of them, to a hardware store yesterday. Long story for another time. As we're getting back in the van, all of a sudden the wind just picks up and we can see it coming. Why? Because there was a bunch of snow sucked up in that wind. And all of a sudden we see it coming. I'm like, go to the other side. Stop trying to get in where the wind is blowing and trying to direct them in the midst of this wind. I asked them when we got in the van, I said, did you blow away? But you can't see the wind, but we can see the effects of the wind. The way God works is so much like that. Can we see the hand of God? Yeah. Because we can view God and we can observe him with our eyes? No, but we see the way that he plays things together. We see the way that he guides and directs and moves and shapes our lives. But here Esau has no time for that. Esau says, God, you're not good today. Why would I think you're good tomorrow? Because Esau failed to see the goodness of God in his life. He despised his birthright. He despised the spiritual. He despised the eternal. So we fast forward to chapter number 27. Chapter 26 is that story I told you about that we're not going to get into the weeds of. But in chapter number 27, Isaac is old. His eyes are dim, so he can't see. And so he calls Esau, his older son, and he says, my son. Esau responds, here am I. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, your bow, go out into the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, to this point, we don't know if the interaction between Jacob and Esau has been reported to Jacob. We don't know if Rebecca has communicated the words you heard from God to Jacob, to Isaac. We don't know that Isaac is aware of any of these things. Isaac is intent on blessing his son Esau. And quick aside here, if I could point out, why does Isaac love Esau? What did it say in chapter number 25? Because he ate of his game. Even in the midst of this, Isaac is getting sucked up into loving him because of what he can do for him. That's the relationship that Isaac has with Esau. He loves him because he provides for him. But here now, as we come to chapter number 27, that's just a quick aside, do with that as you will. What we find is that he calls in his son and he says, I want to bless you before I die. Go and prepare and do these things. In the midst of all of this, we see Rebekah is listening in verse 5 when Isaac is speaking. And so Esau went to the field and hunts for game. Rebekah goes to Jacob and says, your father is speaking to your brother. Bring me game and prepare it that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock, bring me 2 good young goats, that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man. I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing. His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go. Bring them to me. So he went and took them and brought them to his mother and prepared the food such as his father loved. And so they begin to work out this scheme to deceive Isaac. Now, I want you to see in the midst of this, who was supposed to receive the blessing? Who, from God's perspective, was supposed to receive the blessing? From God's perspective, Jacob. From an earthly perspective, Esau. But then he even trades that away, doesn't he? And so in the midst of all of this, who was the one that in God's plan and in God's way was supposed to receive the blessing? Jacob. The elder is going to serve the younger. And yet Isaac is saying, oh, Esau, I'm going to bless you. Rebekah knows how this is supposed to play out. But what does Rebekah do in the midst of this? She manipulates. And she begins to try to do it her own way. And we're going to see how that works out here in a moment. But I want to warn you right here before we get into the rest of this story, be careful not to reject God's plan for today while waiting for his plan for tomorrow. So here what we find is we find 2 dangers. We find Esau, who has rejected God's plan entirely. Carnal, worldly, fleshly, no spiritual bone in his body. Esau. So he rejects, he totally trades it away. But now what we find in Rebekah and subsequently through Jacob is we find, well, God, you're doing this thing. Maybe we can help you. We have to be careful of that as well. We have to be careful about doing the right thing in the wrong way. And what we see is that they have no concern for the deception. Instead, they just have their eyes fixed on the things that God is supposed to be doing. Can I throw this question out to you? What would have happened had they not deceived Isaac? We will never know. Can I tell you what would have happened big picture? Jacob would have received the blessing. You know how I know that? Because God said it. It was going to happen. But now what's happened is Rebekah and Jacob are inserting themselves into this story. They're inserting themselves into the way that it plays out. And we're going to see that that brings about with it disastrous consequences. That brings about with it its own pain and heartache and struggle. Because in all the way that God is working now, they say, we have to step in. We have to be involved. God needs me to accomplish this thing. And we see it play out all the time. But can I tell you, doing the right thing the right way matters. Not just accomplishing the goal. We live in a society that is very pragmatic. Hey, it got done, didn't it? That's not how God views these things. And we're going to see that this plays out in some heartbreaking ways. So as they step in now and they begin this process of deceiving Isaac, they even go as far as to go into in this lamb that they slaughter now and that they prepare. What we find is that Jacob goes and he grabs. If you're wondering how hairy Esau is, Jacob deceives his father by strapping goat hair to his arms. So if you're curious, if you think, guys, if you think you're a little bit hairy, I don't think any of you have probably ever been confused for livestock. And yet, this is what Jacob does. He throws on some of Esau's clothes that smell like sweating outdoors. And he goes to Isaac now with this food that has been doctored to taste like what Esau would bring in from the field. And so all of these things that go together. In verse 18, he goes to his father, and my father, he says, and Isaac says, here am I. Who are you, my son? And Jacob says, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my gain, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? He's asking questions. And Jacob says, because the Lord your God granted me success. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, are you really my son Esau? He answered, I am. And he said, bring it near to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him, and son, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let the people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. And so what do we find? We find that now Jacob has lied to his father. He has manipulated to try to bring about the work that God had already said he was going to do. I mean, this is altogether unnecessary. And we're going to find today, and we're actually going to see it play out over the next couple of weeks, the way that these consequences come back around on Jacob. You see, the Bible speaks of sowing and reaping, how we sow seeds into the field, and that same seed that we sow, we're going to reap a harvest of that seed. And Jacob here in this moment, he sows seeds of deception. He's going to reap a harvest of it. And so now in the midst of this, we find that he has deceived his father. He has lied to him. As human beings, when we don't see how the plan's going to come out, our flesh is a way of wanting to step in. And so sometimes we can manipulate. Maybe we can gossip and just sow a few seeds of dissent or discontent. We can guilt people into behaving the way that we want them to behave. And yes, in those moments, we may get the behavioral alignment. But what does that do? Ultimately, it puts rifts in the relationship. And it divides and it tears and it pulls apart. And sometimes we can go as far as even to lie outright and to say things that are plainly untrue and we know to be untrue. Maybe if we want money or we want a raise or we want a thing, we can steal and we can take from. Or on the day when we're not being supervised quite as closely, we can, hey, I'm going to not quite work as hard as I would otherwise. Or maybe when it doesn't look like God's going to do the thing, we just got to give up. And no matter how we do it each time, what we're saying in those moments is, okay, God, you're not being faithful, so neither will I. You're not being faithful, so I don't have to be either. And so we go about things, we do things in the way that makes sense to us, when in reality, what we ought to do is embrace the weight. Embrace the things that God is doing in his timing and in his way. Because here's the thing. It's better to not have something you want than to have something you don't want. And all of a sudden, what we're going to find is that Jacob's about to have a lot of things he doesn't want that go along with the way that he went about. And instead, in the waiting, we ought to embrace it and say, God, what are you doing in this moment? God, how are you working in the midst of it? And so be careful not to reject God's plan for today. Be careful not to push off God's plan for today by saying, but I'm trying to do for tomorrow. In the midst of all of these things, Jacob's actions incur Esau's wrath. As he comes home, Watch what takes place in verse number 31. Esau, he also prepared delicious food, brought it to his father, and said, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I'm your son, your firstborn son, Esau." Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed." And as soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." And here Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times." Why is he bringing up this name Jacob? It means of the heel. What he's saying is he's grabbed my heel again and tripped me up. He's saying this one has cheated me, and he has played unfairly and against the rules, and he has grabbed me and he has pulled me down with him. And so he cries and he curses against his brother. And he calls out to Isaac, and this is one of those just heartbreaking moments of the scripture, as he goes, "Don't you have a blessing for me? Don't you have a blessing for me?" And Isaac says, "I made him the Lord over you. All his brothers I gave to him." And he says, "Don't you have but one blessing? Do you only have this one?" In verse 38, and Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And in this moment, now he cares about the birthright. Now he cares about the spiritual things and the things of tomorrow. Now he cares about all of these things, but he didn't before. He didn't yesterday. He despised them yesterday, and so they were taken from him. And now he hates Jacob, verse 41 tells us, because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." You see, now, because of the way that this comes about, because of the deceit of Jacob, because of these manipulations, all of a sudden this family is torn apart. Esau swears that he will kill him, and Rebekah overhears this and sends him back to Laban, where she had come from, her brother, and says, "Go live with him. I'm going to tell your father that you have to go and that you need to go find a wife from there, because you can't marry." Similar situation to what we talked about last week. You can't marry around here. You got to go find a wife of our people. And so she goes to Isaac, and Isaac agrees. And so they send him up under the guise of finding a wife, but in reality to be safe from Esau and his wrath that is coming Jacob's way. And even in the midst of this, what we find is Esau in verse number 6 of chapter 28, he sees all the blessing that has taken place, and then he hears that his parents don't want Jacob marrying one of the Canaanite women, one of the Ishmaelites. And you know what Esau does as soon as he hears that? He goes out and marries a Canaanite, an Ishmaelite. He goes out and does the thing that his parents are like, "Please don't do that thing." Why? Because he loves her? No. Because of his anger and his wrath and his spite and his hatred for his family. And so what we find is that while Rebekah and Jacob were trying to do God's plan and pull it off for him, now they've torn their family apart. They've divided, they have broken. In the midst of all of this, I want to really encourage you, do not trade tomorrow's blessing for today's bowl. Don't make the decisions today attempting to accomplish tomorrow the things, and don't trade tomorrow for today. We have to walk rightly and wisely in both places. You see, God's doing a work in your life, and we have to resist the urge, let the shiny thing in front of us pull us away from it. At the same time, we have to be careful and we have to beware not to buy into the lie that we have to make God's purposes come to fruition. He's going to do this thing. He's going to accomplish it. He's going to go and he's going to work in ways that you and I won't be able to see. Now, you're probably not trading away inheritance for a bowl of soup. But here at the same time, so often we're tempted to give away the work that God is doing. You see, we want influence, so we'll stretch the truth on a resume or in an interview. We want fulfillment in our romantic life, so we'll go ahead and we'll behave in ways that we wouldn't otherwise behave. We're lonely, so you flirt with the coworker a little too much, or you want money, so you fudge some number on your taxes. You say, it's just a thing. They're never going to miss it. Or maybe you keep saying yes to overtime, even though your kids and your spouse need you at home. But yes, we're afraid that we don't have enough money in our retirement accounts. Or we're afraid of the bills stacking up, or we're afraid of this, or we're afraid of that. And so we just say, yes, give it to me, all of it. And we take on these responsibilities to neglect the things that God has given to us in the first place. And what we're demonstrating in these moments so often is a lack of faith in God to come through in this situation. But in reality, He is working in our lives in ways that we will never see and we will never understand. But even in the midst of this story where we look at it, we go, man, everybody's kind of awful in this story, right? Like everybody is kind of like, I don't know, there's any of these people that I'm like, yeah, I'd love to go hang out with them. Like we don't trust any of them. And yet, I want to point out that God does some incredible things. I heard an old country preacher say this one time, and it stuck with me. God can use a crooked stick to draw a straight line. And here He uses Jacob. He uses Isaac. And through their family, we find this Savior, Jesus. That promise of God, that Savior that will come into the world and undo all the wrong things, take away sin, rescue and save and create for Himself a people for His name, a spotless bride, which we have the privilege of participating in. And so here today, if you're like, man, I've lived my life and I've done some dumb things. I've messed it up and I've caused tensions and frictions and I've tried to get my own way and it's caused heartache and pain and hurt. Hey, can I encourage you? God's not done with you. God wasn't done with Jacob. God wasn't even done with Esau. God wasn't done with this family. He was continuing to work, and He's continuing to work in your life too. And so this morning, maybe today you're in here and you've never believed in Jesus. I want to encourage you today, put your faith in Jesus. And today, if you're in here and you say, I'm a follower of Jesus, I want to encourage you to emulate His faith. Because as Jesus, as the cross was set before Him, what do we see He does? We see that for the joy that was set before Him, He endured the cross. He didn't resent the plan for today. He knew what God was doing. And so He patiently endured the cross that He may bring us our salvation.